Can PSPs be a gateway into an OBA? So instead of thinking, okay, they completely be replaced right off the bat right now, as we all know, there has to be some sort of transition. Could PSPs act as almost like a transitional point for OBAs? And I guess the way that I'm thinking about it, I'm just spitballing here and brainstorming here a little bit. PSPs right now, you provide access to this innovative therapy. The manufacturer isn't being reimbursed for it, but patients are getting access. Could, for instance, the manufacturer keep track of, let's say, the outcomes, the administrative overhead, or let's say partner with healthcare systems who also look at the administrative overhead, and then use that as potentially part of their submission package, right? So this is therapy itself acting in the real world, and here are the overall costs in the real world, but still through a PSP program. And then subsequently that be a part of the submission package. And then, of course, maybe then transition over to OBA. What do you think about that type of concept, Kostas?
So I think there's the potential for it, right? I think there are a few things that need to be addressed. First and foremost is the privacy rules around PSP, right? So number one, they're not meant to replace clinical trials, whether that's an observational trial or anything like that. So anything that has a hypothesis, there still is consent, but it's very limited in terms of what can be collected and followed up on in a PSP program. Some of these guidances are set internally by the companies. Some of them are set by provinces and the REBs within Canada. But at the end of the day, somehow we need to have the approval and the ability legally to not only provide that product to a patient in a PSP program, but then to also track the outcome side, something more than what is traditionally tracked. Okay, so that's the first thing that needs to be addressed is that those legal and privacy ramifications. The second thing that needs to be addressed is the data collection and the access to the data. Right now, the cost of actually pulling most of the data that would be required to conduct this kind of an assessment for an OBA, but utilizing that PSP framework is pretty expensive. Right? You're doing an entire, in some cases, chart review. Maybe you're just calling up. Oftentimes, it's calling up and getting information, or a clinician filling out a form. That's very simple. But if you're looking at the amount of data that would be required for a more complex clinical outcome assessment, that's really beyond, I think, the scope that any individual pharma is willing to commit to get that product assessed and then reimbursed. So I think there's two things there. There's the legal piece and there's the practical piece of how do you actually collect that data in order to be able to do the analysis. And I think if we take a look at the third piece, which is the quality of the data, if you're to take a look at PSPs today, I don't think that they would meet the criteria that has been proposed by CADTH, for example, in terms of the quality of what's being collected, having a predefined sort of protocol sort of in place and a way to analyze it and so on and so forth. And I'm just going to say right now, that's not a blanket statement for everything, but it is probably on average accurate. It's not what the PSPs were meant for, right? So that's something to keep in mind. They are doing their job. They're providing the product to the patients with a minimal sort of understanding of how it's being used until that patient can access it otherwise, right? So just to be fair, PSPs were never designed for this. Could they be tweaked? If you could deal with each of these sort of three categories, the quality of the data, how do you collect the data, and the legal issues around collecting the data, could you tweak it to make it more along the lines of what could become eventually an OBA, or an agreement could be based upon it? Yeah, absolutely. You could. If you could address those, you absolutely could.